So one of the things that I like to say is that core values are a bunch of BS. If it's just on a wall, they have to be alive in your organization. You have to recruit by them. You have to live by them. You have to fire based on them. Your strategy has to align with them. And even you have to keep people accountable to the core values.
Adam, thank you so much for being here, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Just really quickly, a quick intro. We're talking with Adam Silberstein from OnCourse International. Adam, you're a whole life executive coach and facilitator. You and I met through a mutual friend, through Yuha, right? Who you've worked with in other capacities through EO, right? So you work with a lot of forums, the EO, YPO, and things like that.
Entrepreneurs organization, young presidents organizations. These are probably the two biggest executive and entrepreneurial organizations in the world. Work with them quite a bit. We can talk about them later, but just to explain the acronyms.
For sure. No, that's helpful. That's helpful. And you and I are working together on something similar called the Local Leaders Collective, the LLC for short.
Another acronym,
right? Just all these acronyms all over the place. So we'll talk a lot about that because I'm really excited by the work that we're doing together on the LLC. Already getting some great feedback that, it's changing a lot of lives, and, people wish they had something like this sooner, a support group where they can kind of just share everything they feel like they can't share, with everybody else. And I think that goes a long way. So I want to talk about the LLC, and I want to talk about the work that we did there, and also talk about the other stuff that you do. But I think the best place to start is the start and how you got into coaching, a little bit of your background, because I think, not everybody as a kid and says, I want to be a coach one day.
Of
know what I
course.
mean? It's not a normal thing. So you definitely evolved into being a coach. I'd love to hear how that whole thing happened.
Yeah. Well, how far back you want to go? I wanted to be an ice hockey player when I was
That's good.
6.
Good place to start.
You're
born here, born and raised in Miami?
No, I was born in DC.
DC.
Yeah.
But you grew up in Miami.
No, I came to Miami to the U.
Just totally the U's what brought you here. Gotcha.
Exactly. Finished out high school in Maryland. And was heard about this little place, Miami, and they had a decent football team at the time.
What year was
actually,
this?
This was 2001, 2002.
Yeah, so the really in the heyday. Yeah, for sure.
And came down the U and just had an unbelievable time, and frankly, kind of learned what swagger meant. I mean, that was probably the biggest takeaway.
Was 2001? That was that 2002. Was that the Ken Dorsey days?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Jeremy Shockey and that
Vilma,
whole team.
It was unbelievable.
That was a fun year.
Fork and it was
Frank Gore.
All of them. Yeah. So it was fun. Fortunately, we didn't win the championship that year, even though we went 30 straight. After the 2 years, but it was a fun, definitely season. But so it was in Miami for almost 15, 16 years. Didn't want to leave the Miami area. It's been really great to me. Going back to your question, originally was a finance major. Thought I really wanted to come out of school, wanted to kind of go straight to the hedge fund world, right? That was really what I was gunning for, and had an opportunity to start working as a trader and portfolio manager pretty early on for a family office down here. In fact, it was just a wealthy family, and got to work with some of the older generation of that family, and which was interesting because I really wanted to go the corporate route originally, go to New York and, kind of see how I, competed in that whole space after being down here in Miami. And some of my mentors are like, look, if you have an opportunity to have access to money, run money now, let's get your track record together, and let's it's all about access to capital.
For sure, absolutely.
So did that for a few years, graduated 2006, 2008 happened. And luckily we didn't get smashed by that year, but it was probably one of the most stressful years I've ever had. I've never felt my skin actually boil. And I remember that day when the Dow dropped over 840 points, and what was that, March of 2008, was one of the most stressful days of my life. And, it kind of kept hitting me like, I don't know, is this what I want to be doing, right? There was something that kept hitting me like, I don't know if this is the right place for me, And it wasn't just because of that. It just, the whole field, I don't know. So,
there's a vibe around that field. There's an energy, a certain,
and it's exciting because you get to learn about the world and how the world works, and you can study the world's trends based on the world's currencies and the world and the pricing of markets. Right?
You need to have a stomach for it, though, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And self-admittedly, I don't think I had the emotional discipline at that point, and I didn't have the stomach for it at that point, especially that early on.
Yep.
So long story short, 2008 happened. Started thinking about transitioning into other spaces. Actually got involved in real estate in 2010 when things started bottoming out here in Miami, which was an opportune time to do it because of what was going on here.
Yep.
It was unbelievable. Anybody who was here, it felt like the absolute sky was falling.
Yeah.
Scary, but like the opportunity was all over the place. So as I look back, really thankful for that timing. Also look back like, man, I wish we did more. Like it was unbelievable to see where things are at right now. Anyway, so it's kind of this crazy route from going to finance. Now I'm in real estate and realizing that real estate, one, you can get much more of an edge in a local market than you can in global markets, right? So that's one of the things that I liked. And I also liked that there wasn't constant pricing and liquidity of those markets, right? So real estate, you're not seeing how there's less stress in that dynamic.
Right. Yep.
Even though there's more leverage, there's less stress because you're just not getting priced every day.
Right, exactly. You're not checking apps on your phone
Yeah.
like you are like on a minute by minute basis with like
exactly.
stocks.
Yeah. So anyway, that afforded me a little bit of flexibility. And what happened, let me backtrack for a moment, is 2004, 2005, one of my best friends, Paul Warner, happens to be one of my partners in this business now. His father would fly down randomly, into Miami hotels. And as a college student, whenever your best friend's dad comes down and stays in those hotels, we're like, oh yeah, let's go hang out by the pool and let's order on his tab, right? It's like, yeah, daddy's here or mommy's here, right?
Yep.
So we went down to the Fontainebleau and we end up hanging out with him. And this guy's got this kind of guru energy. I heard about him. He's a CEO coach, by the way. So he works with these CEOs, and you hear these stories about him flying in. He's facilitating retreats on yachts in Miami on the way down to the British Virgin Islands, and at college, like, what, this exists?
Seems like a good gig.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm picking his brain. Tell me a little bit about this. And I'm kind of the guy who's just a little bit naive at times, don't know what things cost. I'm like, cool, you should do that for us, right? Why don't we get together a whole bunch of our friends and we'll have a retreat. And he's like, you know what? I've got two prices, effectively really high and free, right?
Yeah.
And so obviously we went the free route, and he was able to call some favors. We had an awesome house down in the Keys, and it really wasn't just about this amazing house and, having, getting treated like CEOs. It was actually more of, how do we get more intimate? We had a group of 7 or 8 friends that were really close. We're all fraternity brothers, but really we were beer drinking buddies, right? And I think we all know that there's more, right? Especially in college, there's more, because we're all going through struggles, whether it's through, dynamics with friendships or dynamics with girlfriends, right? And I think that at that age, we don't really know how to process things well. We don't really know how to be there. At least we speak for myself. 100%.
And a lot of things stay at surface level at that time of your life, right? And it's just like you don't really go deep with many people.
Correct.
Very often in high school, college.
Yeah, you end up talking about sports, and you end up going out to bars, and you end up partying. It's here in Miami. There's nothing wrong with that. We did plenty of that. Right?
And that's a very transformative time of your life, too.
Right.
You're being shaped in a very specific way. In those years, 18 through 23, you're really turning into a certain person. A lot of your habits and characteristics and your mindset, that's a big period of time and an important period of time for that to be developed, correct?
Totally, yeah. And I'd love to hear kind of about, in your life, I think it's kind of a good question, like, who are the people that formed us to who we are right now? You also went to UM, by the way, right?
No, I went to Florida State.
Oh, why did I think you went to
Because I've always been a UM fan, and I'm born and raised in Miami, and the Canes will always be the Canes. I'll always root for them unless they're
went to Florida State.
Unless they're playing Florida State. Well, I have a reason that I went to Florida State. There was a girl in the story, which there usually is. So, I followed her up there.
Gotcha.
And I had a lot of friends from high school that went to Florida State.
Sure.
But again, I always will root for the Canes. I'll always have a special place in my heart. I went to Hurricane games with my dad. It just happened to not be a place I went to school. I don't think my grades were good enough also for UM. I couldn't make the cut.
Gotcha.
Nor was I able to pay for the private education.
Yeah, when you're in state, it doesn't make much sense.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So
I think it's interesting kind of looking back and, again, who knows where this conversation's going, but it's kind of like,
let's take it anywhere it goes, man. Fuck it.
It's interesting looking back, how different life could be. Like, I'm talking to that finance professor who I'm thinking going to New York, and he's saying, no, actually stay down here. If you have access to capital now versus going big corporate, I've been there. This is a better lifestyle, and you have access to capital while maintaining a lifestyle in Miami. Like, there's not many people who say they can do that, right?
Yeah.
And I look back, I don't know if what's the right move or not, right?
I think about that all the time. So many possible divergent paths, you know? I mean, this freaking podcast, I don't know if it'd be happening right now if Brian and I didn't go to a bachelor party, you know, a few months ago, and we're shooting the shit and we're talking about what we're doing. And I said, you know, I have this idea. And he's like, well, I'd love to be involved with that. I mean, one night is a divergent path. Like he's not sitting here if we didn't link up that night. Neither am I. You know what I mean? And there's so many examples like that probably you could point to, that Brian could point to, that I could point to, that we could go back and be like, man, our life would have been so different. You know, just a hair here or a hair there.
And do you believe that's maktub? Like it's written? You know that term?
Yeah.
You ever read The Alchemist?
It's tough, man. I don't know. I think I sway back and forth on certain things like that. Yeah. There's part of me that believes in if it will be, it will be, right? And then there's part of me that's just like, you know, carpe diem, right? It's just like, you know, like focus on today and live it to the fullest and make the most out of it, and we'll figure out tomorrow as it comes. And there's no wrong way to do life. It's just your life, and you figure it out as you go. I just have like certain principles that I've built up over time that I feel like if I make the right decisions around these principles, or I adhere to these principles, that I'm comfortable with life unfolding however it unfolds.
Interesting.
You know?
Yeah.
And part of that is like being around people that give me energy, right? That give me positive energy.
Totally.
And I feel like if I surround myself with people that give me positive energy every single day, I'm comfortable with life unfolding the way that it does. And if I spend my time around people that give me negative energy too much, then I have to look myself in the mirror and say, well, you know, you did this to yourself. You've chosen people with negative energy. So no wonder why there's negative things happening to you, right? So like I've had beliefs and theories built up over time about, you know, just in general, how to live my life and be happy with the way life unfolds no matter what, or be at least, you know, I guess okay with it. You know, I would be totally satisfied, whichever way it happened. I just wouldn't be hard on myself for making a wrong decision or a right decision.
Right.
I just live my life a certain way with a certain set of principles and let life unfold as it does.
So it sounds like this is kind of where core values come in. So here's how, as a coach, it's like people call me up. I got a call the other day.
Right.
You know, this guy who kind of, you know, in his mid-40s, successful entrepreneur who runs businesses actually in South America, comes in and out of Miami, stressful life, flying back and forth from South America, dealing with geopolitical dynamics. And, you know, is this right? How do I figure out, you know, I'm not home a lot, I miss my kids, but I want to provide an opportunity for my kids, and I'm liking what I'm doing. There's opportunities here, but is this really what I want? You know, help me make this decision around what my vision looks like, right? And it's, how do you do that? Like, how do you tackle that with somebody? You know, and one of the key ways you do that is kind of, as you mentioned, is really getting clear on what your core values are, right? And core values is a term that's thrown around a lot.
For sure. Every company or whatever, right? They talk about our core values.
Yeah,
you know?
And you throw them up on the wall and hope that through osmosis they're absorbed. Right,
exactly.
And you asked me, there's so many questions I've already skirted, but you asked me while I'm here, and why I'm here is because I was just doing a leadership team offsite, right? And so effectively, I work with typically executive teams in the C-suites to try to, you know, figure out anything from strategic work to interpersonal dynamics to even like how we take care of and implement culture. Right?
Sure.
Core values is a big part of that. And so one of the things that I like to say is that core values are a bunch of BS. If it's just on a wall, they have to be alive in your organization. You have to recruit by them. You have to live by them. You have to fire based on them. Your strategy has to align with them. And even you have to keep people accountable to the core values. I mean, you actually can grade. So for instance, for you in your own life, it sounds like you keep yourself accountable to your own core value, which is surrounding yourself with people that are uplifting to you.
Yes.
And if you're not, it sounds like you draw strict boundaries.
Right.
And so as a coach, for instance, or even as a friend, knowing that about you, I can hold you accountable and say, how well are you upholding or neglecting that core value right now?
And I struggle at times. There's certain dynamics in my life. Naturally, everybody, it's not black or white. There are certain people in your life that give you very complicated relationship dynamics, and you cannot sever certain ties. But there are growth opportunities within those conflicts that you could take away from it.
Yeah.
Oftentimes I find that, you know, sometimes we see through a lens where, okay, this relationship dynamic, I'm not happy with it, but oftentimes I'm 50% of the relationship dynamic issue that needs to change, right? So it's a growth opportunity for me, allows me to recalibrate. And then also I think it by me being self-aware about it and recalibrating first, it sets a good environment and a good foundation for a productive conversation with the other person on how to recalibrate the entire relationship.
Yeah.
So it's like, listen, this is the way I feel, like the way that we're working together, or the way that we are every time we're around each other. There's a certain dynamic, but I want to tell you first how I feel that I'm contributing to it, right?
Yeah.
And again, we'll probably talk about vulnerability soon in this conversation, right? Because it's a big part of Forum and why it's important, and being able to feel vulnerable around other people. But I just think that those type of conversations, they're always the healthiest and they're always the most valuable, because I feel like deep down we all want to have very meaningful conversations, but it's always tough for us to get there first. I feel like once you're self-aware, and like self-awareness is something we all have to work on, and there's no end goal for self-awareness. It's just like a continuing thing to do.
Sure.
But the more self-aware I feel like I've become, the less of an ego I tend to have, and the more productive conversations I could have, and the more deeper the conversations I could have with other people, because I lead with that vulnerability first versus, just talking bullshit and talking surface level stuff.
Totally.
So that, it's kind of a long answer to like me drawing hard boundaries. It's like just being self-aware about how a relationship makes me feel, and then leaning into conversations that are productive to make dynamics better, in case I can't sever a relationship out of my life for a reason or two. Right?
Sounds like you need to be a whole life coach.
Yeah,
You've already got the principles down.
It's through osmosis and through you. Like every time so you're a special dude, Adam, because every time we're around, we end up getting really quickly into these type of conversations. You set the environment for that kind of stuff. And I know it's, due to all the work you're doing in Forum and things like that. So always love having you around. And you talked about, skirting over questions. Like, let's skirt around all the questions that we have listed here. Let's go into as many fucking rabbit holes as possible.
So I want to applaud you for one thing, because I think you've done a great job leading by example. I think we should get more into what we've done with the LLC.
Sure.
But I just want to touch on a couple of things you just said. One, you could sit here and talk about how well you uphold your core values. And I think there's tremendous humility every time I talk to you around, yes, I know what that is, but there's struggles obviously, and I'm going to talk about them, but also there's just humility there of like, I see it, I'm aware of it, and that's something I'm learning and growing on. So when I want to see you there for that, and I want to applaud you for that.
Thanks, man.
The other component is, I love how you talked about your 50%, right? I have found, so I am hired a lot of times to work with partnership disputes, and I don't mean legal disputes. I mean interpersonal dynamics, when partners are not seeing eye to eye, they're not aligned, or they're bickering, whatever that might be.
Sure.
Leadership teams, right? So usually I'm the interpersonal dynamics guy, where maybe the building's on fire and I need to come kind of
you're helping mediate those discussions.
Right, right. And not necessarily even mediate. It's way more of a facilitation, meaning I'm coaching them and helping them have the conversations in a safe way, creating a safe environment for whatever needs to be said or whatever needs to happen can happen.
There's a strict difference between the two, mediation and
correct.
And
mediation is more of, I think, interpretation.
Right.
And this is more of coaching and empowering for you to have the conversation.
Yep.
Now, what I have found is the only way people can have a productive conversation is, first step is awareness. How am I contributing to this dynamic, right? Which means I'm taking, you talked about the 50%. I like to look at it between two people, there's actually 200%. 100% my responsibility.
Interesting.
100%. Even if you feel like you're 2% wrong in the dynamic, right? The thought is, how do you take 100% of that? Just like you talked about your 50%, right? And the reason why we do that is, think about the serenity prayer. Right? And I'm not going to repeat that because I know I'm going to mess that up. But it's basically, God grant me the wisdom, know the difference between what I can control and what I can't control. And the way to start identifying what you can control is by looking at, how did I contribute to this undesired outcome, right? And I don't care if you're responsible for 1% of it or 99% of it, right? And so when we start looking at that, the reason why we do that is because we have control over that. We have power there. We have leverage. What I have found is, one of the most misplaced resources is spending time and energy trying to change other people, whether that's with spouses, partners, people on leadership teams, even direct reports, right? So this power of influence, I have found that people are most influenced through leading by example, right? So thinking that, it's the other person and I need to go around and change them and coach them and develop them. The question always is, especially with CEOs, you have dysfunction on their team. I say, okay, what's going on? Hear about all their complaints. And then the question is, what are you doing to create an environment for these situations to happen, right? My thought is, it takes one to tango a lot of the times. It's unbelievable how sometimes that people come and call me and say, well, we need to work with the whole team. My thought is like, no, let's just work with you first. Let's see what kind of changes we can make just by changing your behavior, how you show up. Assume everybody else acts exactly the same, and see what kind of influence you have, especially as a leader.
Yep.
And I like to say, and this is a quote from Vern Harnish, that leaders, companies are simply amplifications of what's going on at the top. So if leaders are able to take 100% responsibility for everything that they see that's not going correctly or the way they want in the organization, then you have an opportunity to lead, you have an opportunity to make change, you have an opportunity to influence, right? If you're going around blaming, pointing fingers, trying to fix things, in my opinion, in my experience, is that it's a misplaced,
for sure.
It's misplaced effort and energy.
Agreed. To make a sports analogy, there are two kinds of quarterbacks. There are the type of quarterbacks that after a loss get on the podium in the post-game press conference and they say, if my wide receiver would have broke the route a few seconds earlier, that wouldn't have been intercepted. Or we lost because I wish special teams could have prepped a little bit better, or whatever the case may be. That's one kind of quarterback. There's another kind of quarterback that gets at the post-game press conference and says, I got to be better.
Yeah.
This on me. We lost. I got to practice more. I got to, those interceptions, I got to be better. I got to be sharper with my reads. Guess which one the players in the locker room, just gravitate towards more.
Of course.
For sure. They always gravitate towards the person that's accountable. And I think accountability is one of the most, to me, like the top signs of being a strong leader. Like, how accountable are you for the failures, or for the failures, but all the things that are happening in this company, or do you deflect blame to other people?
Yeah.
And again, like you said, the entire organization and the culture is usually a reflection of who's at the top. If the person at the top is pointing fingers the entire time, that's how they'll emulate.
Yeah.
They'll just deflect blame amongst each other, and that's a quick way to kill a culture.
Yeah.
But if the person at the top is fully accountable and says it's on me, then everybody will have responsibility. Everybody will feel accountable for rowing their part of the ship.
Yeah.
You agree with that?
100%. And I don't know if I got a lot of great books up here, but I don't see extreme ownership. Do you know extreme ownership? Jocko Willink?
Oh no, but I've seen a few podcasts about him. Yeah.
So he wrote a book called Extreme Ownership, and there's a pretty famous TED Talk. Anybody can just Google Jocko Willink and extreme ownership, and so he talks a lot about that, right? So 100% responsibility is a term that we use a lot, but extreme ownership can be used interchangeably.
Yep.
And effective, the point of his TED Talk, which went viral, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago, I don't know how long ago, was the importance, even, I don't care if it's in a corporation amongst a leadership team or it's amongst the Navy SEALs, which he was effectively the head of the Navy SEALs during, I think, the Iraqi freedom, what do you call it, tour, or campaign. And, the importance of extreme ownership and what it does to cultures, right? If you step up and say, no, it's not your fault, it's my fault, right? Everybody starts looking at themselves.
For sure.
The whole organization starts looking at themselves versus creating a dynamic of blame. Sounds simple, but again, as a coach, my job, anytime I listen to somebody, right away, I'm not going to say, so how did you create this, right? And sometimes people misinterpret responsibility for blame. Right? So a lot of high achievers are really hard on themselves as well. So this whole dynamic of responsibility, before I think a lot of my clients get it, they start off by either pushing back and saying, I'm trying this whole taking responsibility thing, but one, I'm beating myself up. I'm just blaming myself for everything. I'm already hard on myself, and now I'm supposed to take responsibility for everything. Look how much I'm doing, right? I can't blame other people. What about underperformers, right? Do I just say, don't worry about it, right? And that's the other thing, is not only they blame themselves, they also feel like they're rolling over, right? So now I can't hold anybody accountable because it's all my fault, right? And so I can see how that can be misinterpreted. I think that it's part of the learning curve,
for sure.
Right? The thought is, no, absolutely, we tolerate mistakes, but we don't tolerate patterns. Right. So absolutely, let's look at what my responsibility is so that I can learn. But at the same time, absolutely, let's draw strict boundaries. Let's discuss that with people. Let's coach other people to learn how they can take responsibility as well. In no way this is a rollover and gives people free passes, right? This actually helps create better relationships so we can have those direct conversations.
For sure.
And at the same time, in regards to blaming self, I think that it's one of those things I think Tony Robbins talks about. We can look back with regret or look forward with excitement, right? And I think one of the ways we can actually look forward with excitement is looking back and taking those dynamics and those experiences and learning from them, and then having the excitement that we now have this lesson learned that we can apply to the future.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So
yeah,
yes,
that's powerful.
Right. So those two things, I think, for those of you out there that are trying to learn this concept of 100% responsibility. If you're having a challenging dynamic, I don't care if it's with a spouse or with its, again, with it's a partner. If we just step forward, okay, makes sense, give yourself the opportunity. It makes sense that you're upset. It makes sense that you're frustrated here. It makes sense that all these judgments are coming up. You're allowed to have them. Makes sense that all your emotions are coming up.
Yep.
All of it makes sense. Have compassion for yourself. It makes sense that you're allowed to be angry when you feel like somebody did you wrong.
Yep.
Right? Once you kind of own that, like you said, self-awareness, I'm upset right now. I'm in a situation that's not working for me. Allow yourself to be there rather than trying to fix it or do anything. Okay, so now I'm there. Now I look at it, what did I do to create this dynamic? What could I have done differently? Just kind of in more of a, rather than a blaming mode, but more of a curiosity standpoint. I wonder what happened here. And as soon as we start looking there, the answers start to pile up. Oh, I could have done this. I could have done. Okay, so now that you have all these things I could have done, great. Now as I look forward, right, what do I want to have happen in this dynamic? Right? What would a successful outcome look like versus how can I fix the past?
Yeah.
And then what are some of the options that I have afforded to me to try to make that outcome happen? Right. And the most important thing is that when we look for wants, is that it's something that's in our control. I just want her to be X. I just want him to be X.
Right.
That won't work.
No.
Right? Because again, that's trying to change people.
For sure.
So let's look at, yes, I'm thankful that I'm in this situation. And I'm thankful that I'm struggling right now because you know what? This is an opportunity to learn.
Obstacles the way.
Obstacles the way.
Right.
Talking about Jocko for a second.
Yeah.
It's almost a funny video. This guy's really intense.
Yeah.
There's a quick 2-minute clip. You go up and say Jocko good. Everything's good. And all my clients, I send it to them. We all joke around. So when anything negative happens, just good. It's good. Brush yourself up. Good. Opportunity to learn. Re-engage.
For sure.
Reload. Right.
It's amazing when you just shift that mindset, how powerful that is, right? Because we get stuck in those patterns. I've been like, it's your fault. I wish you would change if I could, but that causes resentment and that continues to burn bridges, not build them.
Yeah. Empathy is another one.
That's huge.
So what I like to see, I mean, it sounds so cheesy, but like the 3 things that I think are so incredibly powerful: appreciation, just find gratitude wherever you can, whenever you can, right?
Yep.
Responsibility. Right? That is just huge for the learning curve, directly correlated to curiosity. As soon as you get curious about how you show up, directly correlated to what you're learning, right? To your learning curve. And 3, empathy. Put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Realize most people out there, 99% of people are just trying their best. They're trying hard. They're not trying to hurt you. And if we interpret as them trying to hurt us, we're not learning. We're just getting upset. We're hurting ourselves. We're hurting the relationship. If we put ourselves in their shoes and you're like, you know what? I get it. They're also running hard. They have a lot going on. They haven't slept well. They're traveling. It makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Not give them a free pass, but at least that allows you to open up your heart and say, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
Let's not blame you and putting you in a position with all these judgments. Let's see ourselves as equal people here and realizing that you have your hardships and you're coming from a place that you just mean well, but maybe you came off in the wrong way. Maybe you end up blowing up at me. And rather than me getting upset about I get you're under a lot of pressure right now.
Yeah, that's empathy is so powerful.
Yeah.
Just having a strong EQ, and just
Totally.
Being in tune with other people and what they're going through, super, super important. I want to talk about the LLC because I think it's a great segue into all the stuff that I want to talk to you about regarding forum and peer groups and having other people that you can talk to about these really tough things that are going on in your life.
Yeah.
Because we're all dealing with shit, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times we're dealing with similar shit, and it's good to have a group of people that you could talk to. So what we did together at the LLC, I think, is very special.
Yeah.
And I'd like to kind of share really quickly with whoever's listening. I'd like to share how the LLC came about real quick, and then we'll segue into kind of the work that you and I did together on that. So, I've always been involved in the Miami tech community, just being born and raised here. And, I've always had a passion for the city and the entrepreneurial spirit. And, I started a company here, called Live Ninja. I started it in late 2012. And we sold it in December of 2016. During that time was some of the most difficult parts of my life. Very, very stressful, a lot of depression, a lot of dark days, a lot of loneliness inside my head, feeling that there's nobody out there that could really relate to the problems that I was going through. Because again, I raised venture capital, I had 20-something employees, And I felt all that weight on my shoulders, getting all the investors their capital back, felt this, responsibility to my team to make sure that I could pay them every 2 weeks and I didn't have to let them go so they could support their families, my family. So I would, not look like a disappointment and a failure to them, and I'd be able to provide for my family. So I had this mental.
And you're also having kids during this time.
Yes. So
right?
just for context, I started Live Ninja in December 2012. My daughter was born January 2013, a month later, and my son Kevin 14 months after that.
Yeah.
So it was just back-to-back things. And companies and kids they're similar in a sense that as soon as you figure out how to be a father for a 3-month-old, you got to figure out how to be a father for a 6-month-old, and then a father for a 1-year-old, and then a father to 2, and then that dynamic, and then how do you be a husband, and change your dynamics now with 1 kid and then 2 kids, and then the company is very similar. The way you are as a leader, okay, you're used to being a leader with 5 employees. Now, how do you be a leader with 15 employees? Everything's changing. So it's a rapid evolution, almost forced evolution. And sometimes it doesn't always go up and to the right, and you have all these issues. So I was really struggling with a lot of the stuff going on inside my own head, not sleeping well, not eating well, not exercising. Thankfully, through just sheer perseverance and grit, we were able to sell the company. But I went through this really, really difficult time in my life, from that period, from 2012 to 2016. It was later on, towards the end when I was selling the company, did I hear about EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, and YPO, Young Presidents Organization. These were organizations that my investors and other peers were a part of, that the way they talked about these groups was like, these were one of the most important things happening in their life. Like they would miss events that were going on in their family before they would miss their YPO or EO forum, because it was that meaningful and that important. So I got really curious in what this is. And again, hearing about what they are, they're essentially these organizations, these global organizations that have, organized local groups, peer groups with people that are in similar life circumstances than you, running companies and families and those whole dynamics, where you can go there and just share all the stuff that you feel like you can't share with anybody else. And it's completely confidential. And there's like this, this certain undercurrent of trust and vulnerability, and just a place where you can kind of share just all the things that you felt like you couldn't share with anyone. And just the more I heard about this, the more I was like, damn, I wish I had something like this when I was running my company, when I was running Live Ninja. So again, hearing about it and learning about it was very interesting. And then being involved in the tech scene, I ran a few different community-based events. One was called Waffle Wednesday, a breakfast networking thing that was sponsored by the Knight Foundation that got very, very popular. And another was called Founders Dinner, where I organized, local founders to get together once a month to talk about all the problems going on in their company. Because I was sick of all the bullshit networking where everybody's crushing it and everybody's doing amazing and everybody's, just being superficial because they want to, posture. That's what we do out in society. We pretend things are better than they are, but doesn't really lead to meaningful conversations.
Put on the mask.
So I did this Founders Dinner where I was like, okay, you can't say you're crushing it. I don't give a shit how much money you raised. What's the biggest problem currently going on in your company, and how could we help solve it? And that got, a very good response from the community. So I got reached out by Raul from the Knight Foundation. He reached out to me and he said, again, this is me post-selling the company. I was not doing any community stuff for about a year. And he said, hey, we got to bring you back into the mix. Is there anything you're passionate about? And the first thing that jumped into my head was mental health, because I wish I had, again, something like this where I could help myself with my own mental health. Like, how could I now, if I was to do anything to go back into the community and help other entrepreneurs, what would it be? And it was always just going back to mental health, because I know 90% of entrepreneurs are dealing with shit that they don't want to talk about, or that they feel like they don't have anybody to talk to. So we talked about how to execute something like this. Okay, it sounds great. We're going to help founders with mental health. Now, what's the execution behind it? So that's when I suggested, well, let's look at this model that's working for EO and YPO, these forum dynamics, and maybe we can adopt those forum dynamics for something that we could do and do it hyper local for South Florida. And we started just trading notes back and forth. And the LLC, the Local Leaders Collective, was born to give, and again, EO and YPO, they're phenomenal organizations. This is a little bit different in the sense where, there's not a certain requisite. You don't have to be, making a certain amount of money in your company, or there's certain dynamics that I think are very healthy for EO and YPO as a filter. But what we wanted was something that was a little bit more democratized and open for anybody to get the support that they needed going through the tough times of building a company or building something of value. So that was the genesis of the LLC. Started talking to some of the people that I respect the most in the organization, not in the organization, in the local community in Miami about, how could we get this off the ground? One of those was Yuha. And then I said, is there anybody that that could really help us push this forward? And you were the first, name out of his mouth almost instantaneously.
Awesome.
Got to talk to my boy, Adam. So that's how you and I met.
Yeah.
And then we started riffing on how to do this, right? I told you about the overall concept, but it was nothing beyond that. It was just a concept. And then you and I started trading notes back and forth, got on a bunch of calls, and we made something really cool happen. Totally. So, we launched 3 forums together here in South Florida, we're launching a few more, hopefully in the next few months. But I'd love to talk about just overall that experience, what you think about the LLC and just forum, dynamics in general and organizations that are forum based. And then maybe you could also talk about, for our listeners that are listening, that maybe this sounds interesting to them, why forums are so powerful and why they exist.
Totally.
Yep.
So the first thing that I'd like to talk about is just how proud you should be of the influence and what you created in the community. I mean, this is something that, again, people can talk about. There are those organizations out there. It's easy to say, oh, EO's already doing this, YPO's already doing it. There's an EO's accelerator. There's things like Vistage out there. There's a lot of ways to support executives that are out there. And, to put my efforts to trying to compete there, is that the best thing, right? And you were just dead set. This is what we're doing. We have support, and kudos to the Knight Foundation to seeing the importance of supporting local entrepreneur activity and the local entrepreneurs. You got to feel it and breathe it and be it. But think about this equation that you just put together. And people nowadays say, hey, we got to look back at the native cultures. There's no rite of passage. What you just talked about is one hell of a rite of a passage. Okay, you were in your late 20s, maybe early 30s, right? And you're not only starting a company going from 5 employees to 20, you just raised some capital, you're having 2 kids, you're getting married, you've got responsibility for all these people. That's going to maturate you pretty quickly. So I think there is a modern day rite of passage, right? And frankly, that is actually why I have a job, by the way. That is why there are these forums, because that is a very difficult equation. How do I be there for my young family, my young kids? How do I be there for my employees? How do I be there for myself throughout this? And how do I also be a good spouse at the same time, right? That is very difficult. And I guarantee you there's 98% of people who are not, or who let one of those things fail because it's just too much.
Yep.
Too much stress. Unfortunately, like what you're saying, one of the things that started shaking for you was self-care, right?
Yep.
It started showing up as emotional care and psychological health.
Yeah, mental distraught.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. Because, hey, you can't let the company go down because you got these investors and you got these people. So if there's something that's got to can't be the young kids, right? It's got to be me.
Right. And eventually what I did was, okay, I only have 24 hours in the day. Yeah. And when I get home, I have to be a dad.
Yeah.
I have to, help bathe them and feed them and put them to bed. And then, okay, so now I have to, spend some time with my wife, and I sacrificed some of that because I was like, okay, we got to watch the Netflix. But then as soon as after Netflix, I got to hit emails right away. Yeah. And then, okay, I'm in bed by midnight. And then I'm like, what time can I get up? How early can I get up so I could start the presentation on the board deck or whatever it was at that moment? So I would end up getting 3 or 4 hours of sleep. I would set my alarm clock for 4 a.m. because my kids would wake up at 6. So I'm like, where can I find 2 hours of quiet, 4 a.m. to 6 a.m.? But I was going to bed at 12. So here I am not getting proper amounts of sleep. I'm not exercising. I'm not healthy. So like you said, it was me that I had to, take shortcuts on.
Totally. Yeah. And what's the choice? So the choice is not do it, right? But look, you're a high achiever. You have an idea. You want to make it happen. And at the same time, this entrepreneur activity is the backbone of our economy. It really is, right? Yep. You're creating jobs. You're creating creativity and innovation. And so obviously we want to support that, right? But I think we kind of look at entrepreneurs in this world. It's like today's modern day superhero. I'm like, oh, that's amazing that they're this and that. Most of the people that we look up to, probably Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, they gave in. Remember we talked about those 4 different areas. Maybe they take care of themselves well, but they gave up a lot of personal life. Right? Sure. We know that. We've heard that with Elon Musk. We heard that with Steve Jobs.
Yeah,
right?
We know the stories. Yeah.
So to be able to uphold all 4 of those areas while trying to grow this company, right? it's a very difficult thing.
For sure.
So what I have found, I kind of think of it as like a 3-pronged approach. The only way I would say, we like to say, and I don't have the real numbers on this, maybe 2% of entrepreneurs really get that right. Right. And so what is common amongst those 2% people who are able to get that right? And in my opinion, and what we have found is that it is, number one, a peer group of people who can relate, a relatable peer group, right? This is where Forum comes in, right? So YPO, EO, 92%, by the way, just to give some numbers, 40,000 CEOs around the world are members of YPO. If you combine all of their companies' revenues, $6 trillion. That's with a T.
Yeah, crazy.
That's the 5th largest GDP in the world. Unbelievable. Yeah. There's a lot of power. So this isn't just like, some side organization. Yeah. These are some of the most powerful companies and CEOs in the world that are members of this organization. EO, 26,000, 27,000 CEOs, and I think it's like $600 to $800 billion with the combined revenue. Okay, not quite as
still, yeah,
huge, right? So together, these. And by the way, another stat throwing into that: 92%, 93% of people who join these organizations, they join for Forum.
Yeah,
they don't join for the network. They don't join for all of the content, even though that's great. Right? They don't join just to be able to sit around and brag about how successful they are.
Yep.
They join because they want this peer group so badly, because they need this peer group so badly. Yeah, they need it.
Absolutely. It's amazing how much, like you just talked about those numbers, how much of the world's influence is in these peer groups.
Totally.
Right? It's crazy.
So
and they're in it by necessity, like you said.
There's also numbers about employees. I don't remember what they are, but if you combine all their employees.
Yeah, incredible impact.
Incredible impact. Yeah. So that is actually, it's funny, we're kind of going back to how I got in this business. Yeah. Understanding those numbers and understanding that honestly I had access and an opportunity to be a contributor, to create impact. What I didn't like about finance was I didn't feel like I was creating a ripple effect. I wasn't multiplying myself. Effectively, I was making wealthy people wealthier.
Yep.
And that's fine. That's good. But it did not have the impact that I wanted in my personal life. It wasn't upholding one of my core values. Right. So anyway, that is how, understanding that is how that multiplier effect is something that really inspired me to kind of get into that space, right? And so the fact that you wanted, not only from your own personal experience, to create that, and by the way, one of my personal missions is to create as many safe places, AKA forums, as possible for people who have impact. So when you called me to say, this is what I want to do, this is kind of where the Maktub thing comes in.
Yeah.
Was it Maktub? Was it with the fact that I got to meet Juha and I don't know.
A lot of things aligned.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Right. But you called me up and said basically, hey, Adam, you didn't say this, but hey, I can help you carry out your vision and some of your core values by helping me. Right. You didn't know it at the time, but of course I got super excited about it. Of course I'm in. Yeah. I'm going to do whatever I can to try to support this thing because I know the needs out there.
I noticed it right from the get-go was your you probably, hear about lots of different opportunities, but you were clearly, you narrowed it on this and there was some magnetism there, that you were really interested in helping with, which I deeply appreciate. And again, for the record, Adam went way off of his normal rate to make this happen. So again, I really appreciate you doing that and being a part of it, because I don't know if we could have done it without you. And again, the power of forum, it's something that I'm learning. But I'm in a forum now where just the vulnerability and the fact that they can come into that room and there's no judgment, and we're all like going through, like I said, we're all going through the same shit together pretty much. Like it's so similar. I mean, it's so powerful when you hear other people talk about their issues that you're facing the exact same stuff in some way, shape, or form, even though they're very different issues, but there's always something relatable that you could take from every share. So it's just been really powerful. I mean, it's a new world for me.
Your story is every person's story.
Right. Yeah. I believe it now more than ever. I believe it now more than ever. So it's super powerful.
Since we're not tying many bows here, I have one bow to tie.
Go ahead.
I was talking about that 3-prong approach, right?
Yeah.
So obviously peer groups is one of them, right? That support that we need in order for entrepreneurs, that equation, that 2% that are able to quote unquote kind of get it right. It's the peer group dynamic. The other component is a non-family member, advisor, or mentor, or coach. right? So again, I like to say that you guys are the athletes, the CEOs are the athletes. I'm here as the coach. I'm the athletic trainer. I'm the support staff.
Gotcha.
Right? I'm here because you guys are really the ones creating the impact. You guys are creating the jobs. You guys are innovating, and I'm here to help you through that dynamic, right? That's effectively when I'd say whole life executive coach. That's what I'm doing for the most part. This isn't strategic work. This is honestly, you need a friend in the trenches to help you through that. Imagine when those dark days when you felt lonely, that you had somebody to talk to that you could trust that to help you work through that and come out of that with better mental health, so you could show up for yourself, be able to take care of yourself better, be able to, all those things we talked about, right? So that's the second component. That's the second prong. So first one is having a peer group, that people who can relate to you. I mean, people understand the challenges.
Yep.
Second one is having that non-family member advisor or coach. And the third one is actually something that people like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates do, that a lot of CEOs forget about, is they do these think weeks. They take time off, they get away, and they think deeply, right? So I'm pretty sure that Bezos does this once a quarter. I know that Bill Gates does it all the time, where they just go away into a cabin, or they go off in nowhere and they just read and they think at a high level.
Retreats, essentially.
Retreats.
Personal by themselves or with others.
Whatever that might be. So our hope is that actually CEOs are taking a week to 2 per year, not family vacation. This is separate, to go think. This is actually work, by the way.
Sure.
People think this is part of your, actually one of your highest and best uses is to be the innovative thinker and visionary for your organization. And some of the best ways you're able to do it is to go through these think weeks, which is why people like Jeff Bezos do this.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to get out of the environment that you're in to really shift your mindset, because we're products of routine. And, we come to the office, we sit in front of a computer. Oh, we get to our email. So we get to this. And then we get into meetings, then we get into calls, and then we have to go home. And then it's like repeat.
Mm-hmm.
And, it takes removing yourself from those habits and things like that might not be serving you properly, to really think openly about how you can fix things or align things in your life and in your business, which is why retreats are so effective.
Mm-hmm.
I can see it all the time. There's a reason that some of our best ideas come when we're on vacation, right? I mean, because our mind is free. I was just listening to Naval Ravikant, who has another podcast, which is great for those listening, worth checking out. And he says, like, nothing can really kill your productivity faster than just like a fully busy calendar where you're just like fully booking meetings the entire time. What you need to really do things of impact is free time and a free mind. Yeah. Like to really if you look at his calendar, like people are envious because there's like nothing booked because he protects the calendar so much, but he literally is reserving time for just thought. Yeah. For thinking deeply about certain things. With that said, tactically, since everybody lives off their calendar, fill your calendar with free time. Right, exactly. I actually block it out. Exactly. Yeah. That's kind of a rule I have with my clients, 5 hours per week of me time. That doesn't mean F off time. Right. That means high level thinking time. For the stuff that you need to do, your highest and best use. If you could look at what is the thing that I know is most important for me to do, that could be filled up there. I have a client where once a week I challenged him. He goes on a walk on the beach once a week on Fridays. Nice. Right? And this is not him F off. This is work day, the middle of the work day. This is think time for him. Love that. Just an hour to think walking on the beach. I love that. Is that a good use of time for a CEO to do that? 100%. I believe that now. I wouldn't have believed that 5 years ago. How many CEOs have the discipline to do that? Yeah. Right? Yeah. So it's things like that where, small little nudges like that, really change. And by the way, it's so incredibly, I want to get back to LLC, but one of the things I also want to talk about is manage your energy, not your time. And understanding something like an hour of working out, an hour of walking on the beach just jacks up your energy. Oh, for sure. Right? Allows you to think in this creative mind versus just putting out fires. Yeah. Brian and I talk about it all the time, getting out of the office, doing walk and talks, going to the park, and just having some meetings outside of this space, of trying to, just think more creatively. You know who was king of that? Teddy Roosevelt. Was he really? He had, literally in the middle of the winter, he would have people walk around. He would go up Rock Creek Regional Park, which I actually grew up on Rock Creek Regional Park in the Maryland side. And middle of the winter, he would have meetings. People are freezing, and he's just walking through. He would apparently jump in the lake in the middle of the winter. He was just a crazy guy, right? Going through the Amazon. Yeah. But this whole, what is it called? Walking meeting, right? This was something that he did all the time. I love that. And now that I live in Boulder, whenever people say, hey, let's meet, let's have lunch, let's have a coffee. Yeah.
right away I say, no, meet me at this trailhead. Let's have a walking meeting.
I love that. Make a hike out of it.
Right. And honestly, there's something about getting out, thinking high level, the creativity, the connection that you create is something that's unbelievable. So again, moving more, creating dynamics where you get more energy. You can have meetings, go for walks, go walk on the beach, have a great meeting. It's small little things like that make a huge impact in your life, especially when you're struggling to find energy, as you just said, on 3-4 hours of sleep. Find energy where you can.
All right. I mean, we talked a lot about forum at a high level, but can we get into the specifics of what happens in forum?
Yeah.
Like, what are the details? And like, for the people that are listening that are starting to get intrigued, what could they expect if they joined a forum peer group?
Well, unfortunately, what happens in forum stays in
right.
forum will. So.
That's the first rule.
It's like Fight Club. Exactly. We're not allowed to talk about it.
We're not allowed to talk about
it. That is the first rule, is that it's highly, highly confidential.
Right. But there is a structure that we could talk about.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, of course. Just joking.
Yeah, for
there.
sure.
No, it is a highly confidential dynamic, right? So obviously the underpinning is trust, that it's a safe container. And what I like to say is that, yes, there is a structure, but the hope is that the structure creates a dynamic where there's safety so that whatever needs to come up can come up.
Right.
The structure is just there when you have 7 to 10 people. They're typically 4-hour meetings once a month. Okay. Some groups have 3-hour meetings. Some groups have all-day meetings. Some groups meets every 6 weeks, maybe quarterly. But kind of the traditional YPO model is 4 hours once a month. Right. Now there is this kind of typical cadence, and there's some different forms there. But we can talk about some of the key concepts, key components of a forum meeting. Mm-hmm. But again, that first component is safety, right? And there's nothing that hurts safety more than breaches of confidentiality, which means breaches of trust, right? So again, relatable dynamics, relatable, safe environment so that we can share what we need to share, because you know what? There aren't other people that we can share with or that can relate to what we're sharing. Right. So we can't talk to our accountant about it. Right. We can't talk to our lawyer about it. Frankly, we probably can't even talk to our shrink about it if we have one, because they may not be able to relate. Right. Mm-hmm. So again, that's why this is an incredibly unique space, especially for CEOs and for executives. So what happens? So typically it's this 4-hour meeting. The hope is to create somewhat of a non-board meeting type of environment. So hopefully you're meeting somewhere where it's, like kind of more of like sofas. It's something comfortable, feeling more homey versus feeling too corporate-y. Right. Let's get out of, you're in that all day, so let's get out of that. Yep. And so the other hope is that people are coming, you're kind of set prepared work, in advance. So it's like, I haven't met you in 30 days. Okay, what are some of we talk about the highs and the lows, right? Mm-hmm. So the top 5% and the bottom 5%. We say everything else between the top 5% and the bottom 5% is really just gossip. Right. We started with the weather. That's part of that. Yep. That's part of that 90% there, yep. Right? So really, kind of thinking about the last month, what's some of the things that have given you the most energy? What are the top 1 or 2 things that has most energized you? And then what are the top or lowest 1 or 2 things, or the top 1 or 2 things that have most drained your energy, giving you angst, right? Now, looking forward, also same thing. What are some of the things you're most excited about? What are some of the things that you're most drained? So that's kind of an easy, quick update, right? And sometimes we'll have meditations to start to transition from workspace, or here in Miami being in some crazy traffic and then fly right into your forum meeting. You need to set the space a little bit. I know groups that light a candle. I know groups that sage themselves, and what's it called when you sage somebody? You
cleanse it, or the good?
It's a cleansing word. I forgot the phrase people use.
Remember?
Sage. Yeah.
When you do this, you're purging someone?
It's like that. I totally forgot the...
Yeah. We'll look it up.
I'm sure it'll come up. Anyway, so it's some sort of intentional transition, just like you would in a yoga class. You might you might breathe, right? So again, intentional transition, because this is intentional space. And then you're going to kind of go into sometimes an icebreaker, which is kind of like an interesting question that you've never asked, right? So maybe like, what are the masks that you put on in the real world, right? We talked about masks, right? So what's the mask you put on at home? What's the mask you put on when you're networking? It's kind of questions like that to get the because
we all wear them.
Right. So, I have thousands of questions that you can ask, hypothetical type questions. Go into that. And then the hope is everybody's come there prepared. And, I have my own ways to kind of make sure everybody's prepared for meaningful presentations. And when I say about presentations, this is something where I want to go in depth about something that is not working for me in my life, where I need some help, I need some feedback, right? Effectively forum as a sounding board. So there's some things I'm thinking about, and I've asked maybe my wife or my husband, I've asked my partner. I've asked people on my team, but I really need some other source of feedback, or I need some other form of a sounding board.
Yep.
And so there's a structure on how to prepare for that, so that's succinct, so it doesn't take, again, this is a 4-hour meeting, which sounds like a meeting, but between 7 to 10 people, it actually goes by super quick.
It does. It's a blur. It's very quick.
Blur.
Yeah.
And guess
you're
what?
talking about deep stuff, so it's even faster.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And guess what? With 7 to 10 people, with all that energy in that room, you could go on for much longer.
For sure.
Right? And you don't get a lot of talking time in that 4 hours.
I just had a 4-hour meeting, I think it was last week or the week before, and I just at the end, I was like, that's it? No, we need more time.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah.
So it's tough to even in 4-hour meeting to get get two full presentations. It's very difficult.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And so a presentation really is, the thought is everybody comes in, there could be, again, 7 to 10 people, meaning that there could be at least 7 to 10 presentations in one meeting, right? But just like frankly, in leadership and team meetings, and just like with time management, it's about prioritization.
Right, for sure.
Right. So let's prioritize what's the most important thing as a group, because guess what? We're a group here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also around the concept that your story is my story.
Definitely.
That we almost were indifferent around who gets to go. We'd rather prioritize around either urgency or the importance of it.
Something that's time sensitive needs to happen. So like a company's running out of money, or like, I'm dealing with a family issue that is time sensitive. Usually want to give some importance or urgency to those things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And sometimes it is importance and not urgent, right?
Yeah.
Some groups will say, let's prioritize based on like 1 to 5, shoot, whatever's what's most important, throw out a 5, whatever's least important, throw out a 1. Sometimes people will actually point to which story do you want to hear from, right? Because and so you actually get to select others. So there's a bunch of different ways to do it, but again, prioritization to make sure we're having 1 or 2 deep conversations about something that is important to somebody in your group.
Yep.
And again, in the hopes is that we're here to not only support you, but as we're supporting you, we're learning a lot and 100%. We're leading. And so that's really it. It ends up being a 4-hour meeting, and there's ways that we communicate too.
Yep.
There is no shoulding. There's no, this is what you have to do. This is what you should do, right? The hope is that we come in there with enough experience and relatability that we can speak from experience. This is a great tool, by the way, that everything you learn in Forum is something that you can extrapolate and put into your life.
Definitely.
Right? So one of the things is that I think you learn how to speak succinctly, which I don't know if we're doing a great job of right now, but or I'm doing a great job, taking 100%.
You're doing awesome. We're speaking honestly. And that's another thing Forum teaches you.
But no, it's difficult because you actually need time cops to make sure. Because again, when you go deep, you can time might float away.
For sure.
Right. And when you're creating a safe space, and you've probably felt this, is that the rest of the world starts to meld away.
It does,
Like even right now, you get so present in the moment where you lose track of time, you lose track of what's going on. So I think you need help there, and that's why we have train moderators. It's part of like what I'm doing, helping you launch these things, is making sure that these meetings are getting run well. Because if we lose safety, we lose process, these things become ineffective, and these things could fall apart.
Yep.
Right? So the thought is that it's a highly processed meeting, but also at the same time, it needs to have enough flow and creativity and energy where it creates authenticity. We're able to authentically go into these deeper level conversations.
Yeah, I love it. And again, like you said, like I was part of the Forum just last week, and I didn't share. It wasn't my turn to share presentations, but I learned so much from the other presentations that, again, there was so much to relate from there, and I got so much value. It sounds like a lot, 4 hours, once a month in the middle of the day, but the value you get from those 4 hours, you end up saving time elsewhere in other things because you're applying lessons that you're learning there. So I think it's super powerful. I do take issue with the phrasing presentation. I feel like it's, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like we can come up with a better word for it, because it feels like very much
exploration.
Like, that could
I use that a lot of times.
Yeah, I like that better because it feels like very PowerPointy. Like I'm about to have a presentation.
I agree. People ask that, what is it, a PowerPoint?
Right. It sounds like it, but it is more like more of a vulnerable share. I'm going through something and I could really use the help.
Totally.
And it's great. And I love, again, the format that Forum provides and the structure that it provides teaches you how to be a better communicator, teaches you how to have more empathy, teaches you how to listen, which is so important. The power of being a great listener these days and having empathy, like you said. I mean, it's such a great...
There's a component in that where you just can only ask questions.
Right, exactly.
Learning just to ask questions is an incredibly powerful tool. Any coach just has Any good coach, frankly, just has a set of good questions that they ask. You can coach anybody. If you have a great set of 5 to 8 questions, you're becoming a coach.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
And I don't think I didn't experience finish about the experience share. But what I was going to say is there's no advice. This is what you should do. This is because first of all, that can be potentially really shaming, and there's a liability. Hey, Will, you should go, hire so and so, or you should partner with this company, or you should tell your wife this. And imagine if you actually do it and I'm wrong, that's going to hurt the relationship, right?
For sure.
And so the thought is, hey, Will, you know what? I've been through a similar situation. This is what worked for me, and this is what didn't work for me. You get to pull whatever information and wisdom out of that. Maybe there's none. Maybe you get to learn from my experiences and do the exact opposite. But I'm not putting it on you. It's up to you to take the information out of it.
I love that.
And honestly, that's something you can do in everyday life. Just speak from experience. Hey, you know what? I don't know what you should do here, but in my experiences, that's a great way to manage people as well. Hey, you know what? When I went through the similar situation, this is what worked well for me.
Absolutely. And I've already started to apply it, these principles in my daily life. I get other dads asking me for parenting advice. Here's a situation where I'm trying to figure out how to be a great parent, how to figure out how to be a dad. I'm learning every single day. So, what works for me doesn't work for the next person because we're all so different. But Forum is teaching me is how to just say, in my household, in my experience, this is how we do it. It might work for us, but it might not work for you. But I'd love to share what we've done and see if you could take something from it. I think that's a much better way to saying, like, you should put your kids to bed by 8:00 at night.
Right.
No ifs, ands, or buts. And if they yell, forget it. You don't want to give that kind of advice.
Yeah.
But if you should say, like, in my experience, in our house, 8:00 is bedtime. And it seems to work for us. We do have issues, but in our experience, that's what we've been doing. It's just a different kind of conversation.
Totally. It's safe. I mean, think about it. Hey, you know what? Parenting's really tough.
Yeah.
Getting kids to bed on time, that's challenging.
Right.
This is what worked for me. This is what didn't.
Exactly.
Right? So I'm now, if I receive that information, I'm actually listening versus if somebody shoulds on me, I say, don't should on me.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Don't should on me.
Yeah, don't should on me. I like that. Don't should on me, bro.
Yeah. And it's true, right? I mean, right away, when you start saying you got to do this, you got to do this, first of all, but you're basically saying, I got it all together, stupid. This is what you should do. Right. And actually, one of my first mentors, we never got into all the mentors from college we were going to talk about.
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
But one of my first mentors said, as a salesman, this guy was known as just an unbelievable salesman back in the 60s. And one of the things that he said he learned early on was that he felt super smart and he knew exactly what these customers should be doing. And he felt like he was right. Like in this, he was basically selling mutual funds at the time, right? Which was a big thing. And I won't get into the whole story of what he was getting out of. He was getting out of like whole life insurance plans at the time and kind of informing how they could take that they had money there and how they can invest in mutual funds. That was a big concept at that time. There was real wealth that was getting created. And he was right, but he was basically saying, hey, listen, you made some stupid choices and listen to me. I'm a young kid that knows better than you. And you're basically calling the person stupid. So I don't care if you're in sales. I don't care if you're creating relationships. To be shooting on somebody, it just creates the shaming dynamic, and people are going to get defensive. And you can't influence people when they're defensive. Yeah. People don't want to listen when they're defensive. And frankly, it shuts off the learning dynamic. Right?
For sure. Definitely. I love Don't Shit on Me. I feel like we should make a t-shirt.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Bumper sticker.
Yeah. We were just talking about mentors. Right. And I'd like to shift a little bit into, Forum is important, obviously, for CEOs and leaders and, having that peer support group. But how does the role of mentors and advisors and that side of what you do, how does that play into like the whole holistic experience, like, and be a complement to Forum? Or what's the difference between do you need a mentor or an advisor if you have this peer group? Again, what are the different lanes there and how do you approach them and how do you see them?
Well, again, back to the equation you were talking about, trying to take care of yourself, trying to take care of your family, be there for your family, be there for your spouse, be there for your employees. That's, again, a difficult dynamic. And yes, peer forums help, but they're limited. Right? So once a month for 4 hours, like you said, you didn't get to present. Yeah, you got a lot out of it, right? But for people who have been in Forum for 5, 10 years. And by the way, people who are in these forums, they stay in for 10, 20 years. This isn't, and they're closed forums, by the way. It's not like an AA meeting where it might be different people each time. This is, you're building up an incredibly unique bond with people who really aren't friends. They're more than friends. They're not business colleagues, right? It's kind of these just, and if you talk to anybody who's in forum and they talk about their forum mates, it's a different kind of connection that you haven't seen.
Yeah, right? I can see that. I can see that already.
So anyway, but it's limited.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, so by the way, as part of my work, we talk about facilitation. Every year these forums meet on an annual basis. For an extended period of time. They go on like 3-day trips. And a lot of times they're exotic locations.
Yep.
Let's go celebrate. Let's go have fun. Let's go to an exotic place. But at the same time, let's learn. Let's get closer. Let's learn how to create a better form experience. Let's also learn personally, maybe personal development, leadership development. So they'll bring in different resources in order to assist them in the facilitation of those retreats. They'll bring in somebody like me a lot of the times in order, that's another big component of what I do, right? So again, what happens is that even though that's nice, even though it's a great big part of life, and I think it's incredibly influential, it's limited. Right. And so I tell people when I go on these retreats, I tell people, hey, I get that you want to try to juice up this form as much as possible. You want to try to get as much take-home value. But a lot of times they're saying, look, we're going to move the needle a little bit. We're going to have a great experience, but it may not impact your forum experience in a huge way. We could have a great retreat, and maybe it does, but I like to actually lower expectations because there is a sugar rush after any offsite, after any retreat. There's a sugar rush. There will be a sugar rush. So the beautiful thing is I like to say the meetings are actually what happens in between retreats. Retreats are hopefully profound experiences, and then you have these meetings that kind of carry on the momentum in between the retreats, right? But for a lot of times when you have those 4 struggles like we were talking about, those 4 areas that you're kind of upholding, it may not be enough, right? And so especially when you're going through challenging transitions, like for instance, having 2 kids, raising money, hiring people, like that was a difficult time. And even I not guarantee you, but my assumption is that just going to a forum meeting once a month may have not been enough for you at that time. Right?
Possible.
Could there have been somebody there where I need to talk to on a more often basis who can really focus on me? Because if you think about it, if you're meeting, you only meet really 10 times a year.
Right.
And maybe there's 2 presentations, sometimes there's 1. Then you only get to present once or twice a year.
Right. And as a business owner, things are shifting, dynamics are changing so rapidly, so sometimes you need that touch point way more often.
Exactly. Accountability. And so that's where people like myself come in, really to provide that additional support to create that third prong. If you're lucky enough to have a non-coach advisor who's in your life, who's a mentor who you can meet on a regular basis, that's phenomenal. I find that most people find that really challenging. The people that do have these direct mentors in their life, that's something to really be appreciative of. I've had some great mentors in my life, but are really tough to come by.
Yeah, they are. I mean, I've had advisors in my life through the context of just running the company. You've signed on advisors, you give advisory shares and things like that, but always the dynamic was still like tainted in a way, I would say, because there is still a dynamic because they're part of the company. They're technically an advisor to the company. There's less of this like independent, here I have no strings attached. The only thing I care about is your well-being and you making the right decision here. Like I feel like you need that independent third party as an advisor that really is off your cap table, that is somebody that you can really trust, that's in your corner, that can give you like a real fresh perspective and help you keep things aligned. I think that's incredibly valuable. And it's like you said, it's really tough to find.
And it's interesting. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And non-family member, because when I say non-family member, and also I think when I say that too, is somebody also doesn't have a vested interest.
Correct. So
non-family member, non-cap table, as you put it, person.
Right.
Because again, there's a conflict of interest there.
Right. Exactly.
It really is.
Exactly.
So yeah, there's obviously that space there. And what's beautiful about it is that I'm noticing, and especially and in our generation, frankly, companies are starting to get the importance of this.
Yeah.
And so what I'm finding, I love working with companies that are call it our generation. There's such a big difference, right?
Yeah.
Technically we're millennials, right? And I'm sure we hate being called that. I mean, I don't love it, but I'm actually really proud of it. I don't think it's a derogatory term in any way. I think we've done an amazing we've influenced the economy in just an amazing way.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm really proud, frankly, of what our generation does. I can't stand all the naysaying, even though I get it, right? And I think every generation goes through their own pushback or whatever. But I'm really proud of what we've done as a generation.
Yeah, I agree.
We've created an enormous impact, and frankly, I think we've balanced kind of this greed versus impact.
Yeah, it's a very
dynamic.
social conscious generation.
I think so.
Yeah.
But at the same time, let's drive innovation. It's not like
Yes.
we're just, social impact only. Like, no, we're creating real innovation and real technology.
And this is a very entrepreneurial driven, generation too.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's not just about, I don't think it's just the Instagram. I mean, you can find the people that are just Instagram world. But the reason why I'm bringing that up is that companies are getting it. The companies that are run by people who are our peers, they're getting the importance of happiness, of workplace safety, of psychological safety. And so what I'm finding actually is that I'm having companies call me and say, I want to have a coach for some of my VPs or some of my colonels, lieutenants, right? Who just need somebody to talk to because, you know what, they're basically CEO. They're running a 200-300 person division. And I want somebody there to them. And guess what? Don't even report back.
Yep.
I got a referral from you. I know who I can trust you. I just want somebody there for them to support them who's a non-interested party.
I really like that.
And I have a couple of clients right now. Literally, for last year, they're getting good ripple effects and good feedback.
I love that.
Keep it going. Hey, do you guys want to renew? Absolutely. We love what you're doing. They don't know or care about. I'm sure they care, but they don't even ask about what we're doing. Right. And so as long as the guy's still performing, he's feeling happy, he's getting the support, they're saying this is a great investment.
That is, I mean, that would be one thing also that I would have loved to invest in my team as well. That's so big. I think that's so big.
Yeah.
I want to talk about company culture real quick because that is a kind of a buzzword these days. Everybody wants good company culture. There's a lot of keynotes that talk about culture. But again, I feel like if you ask 10 different people what company culture means, you get 10 different answers.
Sure.
What does company culture mean to you? I know it's something you work on in creating good culture. To you, what is culture?
So what comes up for me, there's actually two studies that's interesting out there that I think are incredibly impactful around this topic. The first one actually, I would say it's called Project Aristotle. It was a study, by the way, for those of you that are out there, this is like, I feel like this is like one of the most unkept secrets out there, or it should be an unkept secret, is that it's called Rework, R-E-Work, and it's Google's resource. They basically, all of their studies, internal studies that they do on culture or they do on management or leadership development, they post it all for free.
Wow.
And it's part of the Google suite, and you can just actually Google within Rework, R-E-Work, right? Just like in an email, R-E:work. And you can Google just about anything, and they'll have different studies about what worked or what didn't within their 400,000 employees.
Wow.
And all of their algorithms and their ability to study this stuff.
That's
so
really cool.
You can actually go Google culture and learn a whole lot of stuff from Google, which is a pretty decent company to learn
for sure.
from. So it's a resource that every CEO is just like, wait, what? They post all that stuff for free? Like, yes, go find it. I don't know why they don't promote it more, but it's interesting. So anyway, there's this really famous study that's called Project Aristotle and happened in 2012. And apparently there was a cultural crisis in Google during that time. And so effectively, I think their strategy, and the strategy then, I think in the tech space from like 2006 to 2012 was really just hire the best and the brightest and go at it hard. Like, we don't even care. And in my understanding, culture was not as big was not as important then. Okay. And so what happened was Google kind of ran into this cultural crisis, and they're realizing you have all these great people who are, A players coming out of the best schools who are the best engineers, but why aren't their teams functional? Why aren't their teams productive? Why are some teams more productive than others? And effectively what they found with all the studies is that the only thing that they found as a common thread amongst the most productive teams was psychological safety. Right? So they found that the most productive teams had a high level of psychological safety so that they could tap into radical transparency, radical candor, which you see the book right here, Principles, he talks about radical transparency is all. Why? Because he tried to, this is Ray Dalio here, he also tried to create an environment where safe enough environment where we can say whatever we need to say. He uses algorithms, all kinds of interesting dynamics. And I've heard a lot of things about their culture, and it's not for everyone, and he'll say it's not for everybody. But his attempt was to try to create enough safety for those kind of people in order to have the conversations they needed to have, right? It's the same thing with Google. Now, the question is, how do you create that? And so what they found is you have to have a set of norms that is agreed upon that we're all following. Effectively, these are the 10 commandments, right? So that's why, by the way, our society as we know it, the Western world, Judeo-Christian, whatever you say, follows these 10 commandments, right? It creates a safer culture if we're not going around stealing and killing each other, etc. Now, of course, it happens, but honestly, even though we probably, a lot of us run around in more fear than we should, percentage-wise, it doesn't happen nearly as much as honestly, as it could if we didn't have these understandings in effect, right? So we actually have these these agreed upon set of norms already in our society. And the thought is create specific, have an agreed upon one on teams, right? So it's almost like the 10 commandments of a team, 10 commandments of your culture, 10 commandments of conscious leadership of here, right? So an understanding of what leadership behavior actually means. What are the expectations? Now, I have found that when it comes to culture, focus on leadership, like I said before, companies are simply an amplification of what's going on at the top. So if leaders are leading by example and they're upholding these 10 commandments, 15 commandments, whatever they are, these leadership expectations or behaviors, then you really get to start impacting culture.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. I had my own experience building culture, and Live Ninja, we went through a lot of different things as far as the company goes, and we shifted and pivoted all this, to different forms of the business. One of the things that I feel like people think that we got right, and I feel like we got right, was setting a good company culture. So I have my own perspective on culture. I believe it is very similar to what you just said. To me, company culture is all about trust. 100% trust. And this also goes back to
psychological safety.
Exactly. With Forum, right?
Oh, so,
psychological safety.
It's all built on the same
principles, right? So the idea is if you can come to work and at that company that you can trust the people in that room, you don't have to worry about them. There are no agendas. There's no issues. Everybody's there collectively to build something that we all believe in. That is company culture. It's not pool tables. It's not unlimited snacks. It's not unlimited vacation policies and all these different things. It is all about trust. And to me, that defines company culture completely. Once you erode trust, even if it's just with one person and somebody looks at another person, they say, there's something about that guy that I just don't trust. There's an agenda there. There's something that completely kills company culture. And that starts to be contagious. So you really need to cultivate, this level of safety and trust within a company. And then all the other stuff, the pool tables and all the other perks that you want to do, you build on top of that. But it all starts, to me, in my opinion, with trust. To me, culture is trust within the organization.
Yeah. I think it's synonymous with psychological safety, right? Because what does trust do? It allows you to feel safe. If I trust you, right? And I kind of think of trust has several components. One, reliable. You're a person that you're going to do what you said you're going to do. You're a man or woman of your word, right? So you're reliable. I'm going to trust you. Right. I trust this person to do something. Right. That's part of it. The other thing is I'm able to be vulnerable with you without you using it against me. Right. So I can share, hey, you know what? You're my boss, but I can come to you and say, you know what, I'm having a real issue with this. I'm struggling with, I need support. Right? Think about what a learning dynamic where it's safe for me to come to my boss and admit my faults versus try to hide behind my mask and say, no, I'm just, I'm figuring it out. I'm reading books. I'm trying to figure it out on my own, but I don't want anybody to know that I'm struggling here. Versus opening up and saying, I feel safe because in this environment, we don't expect everybody to be 100% knowing everything. We actually expect people to be humble, to step up and own what they don't know and ask for help, right? So that trust, that vulnerability is there, right? There's also this adaptability that I'm able to stretch towards when somebody else needs my help or we need to pivot as a team, that I'm not just going to be stuck in my place and say, no, this is what I do. This is what I focus on. I'm willing to be adaptable. You trust more people when they're more adaptable.
For sure.
And then I think the last component, this is like a trust equation. It's actually out there. I forgot who wrote it. But the last component is that there's mutual interest, that I actually feel like we're on the same page, that we have a joint vision, and that as I help you, I'm helping me too.
100%.
Right? If you have self-interest at all starting to pop up in an organization, sales teams struggle with this a big time, right? You have these big sales egos who comes in, they don't really care about the company, they don't care about the culture. And unfortunately, a lot of times, by the way, I find, not to beat up on sales, I find this is where culture gets killed a lot, is where you bring in a sales guy, or sales guy gets to be 20, 30, 40% of revenue of a company. He's almost too big. She or he is too big to fire, to get rid of, but killing culture, bringing in a lot of the revenue, but guess what? Not upholding any of the core values, right? People don't trust. It's totally sandbagging the environment. So anyway, The mutual interest thing.
Yep.
Right. That's a big component. So when I start thinking about trust, those are different areas to start pulling, strings to pull on.
For sure. Totally agree.
And what happens when there's trust, when there's psychological safety, then we have open communication, just as Ray Dalio talks about radical transparency, radical candor. And so what we have found is, again, when people are able to have that and they're able to be much more creative, when we feel safe, we're creative. And it's interesting, if you think about it, when we feel safe, when we're trusting, that's when we play. That's when we collaborate. The playing is actually a part of feeling safe, right? When we feel safe, we get to play. If you look at lions out in the Serengeti, when they're playing and all by a tree and, they're having fun, that's actually when they're learning and growing. But it's because they feel safe, right?
Yep.
So, of course, when we don't feel safe and we're on the hunt or when we're defending ourselves, that's when we're defensive. We're fear-based, right? And unfortunately, you don't want to have a fear-based culture because people are not creative. They're not using their best parts of their brain. They're more reactive. And I think from a nutshell, I think that in a nutshell, that is kind of what a productive culture, or what we hope all to create in a organizational culture.
For sure. Especially, this is because it applies for companies of all sizes. At startups, it's really important you get this right from the beginning. I think, because also you're in a company where you're dishing a lot of equity to early stage employees to take big chances on your company, which is unproven.
Totally.
So what you do is you have all of these people, now all of a sudden you have 12 strangers aligned in a room, but they're all aligned under maximizing each other's equity because they all have bought into this vision. You're not paying them as much as market rate could give them because you're a startup. So you compensate with equity. And it's really important, at least I've found, that you need to establish 100% trust between everybody in that room because everybody's working to make the person next to them, hopefully, some money, moving forward and make that risk pay off. So if you get one or two people in that room that are not working hard enough or that have other hidden agendas, if there's any level of distrust in that room, quickly the motivation gets sucked out of the room. Quickly there's just a total turn as far as like the optimism and things like that. So when you can walk into a company and know that the person sitting to your right and the person sitting to your left are 100% dedicated and focused and a good human being, and they're working really, really hard to not just make themselves successful, but also you successful, then you can do your best work, in my opinion.
Totally.
100% trust in what's going on.
I mean, that's kind of the theory that the Army uses, is that when they're kind of, sweeping a street, you're responsible for this vision. You don't want people looking all around. You'd rather actually operate in a circle, and each person has a slice of the pie, because I trust this person here, that they'll look out for me there, rather than me have to being on a swivel the whole time, that I can trust my brother behind me, right? So that's kind of the same exact thought. Now, the thing is that many times I work with friends just getting together, let's have a startup and let's create a company, and it's exciting. Like, imagine if you and I were ever create anything. What we would do is probably create legal processes first. Like, let's get it all out in writing to make sure, because we know that we, at this stage, most of the time, any good friend, I had one of my best friends I was in a real estate partnership with, right? And we did everything together. Unfortunately, it crumbled, because of business. Great learning lesson, and it crumbled. And we always said it would never happen to us. It would never happen to us, right? And so we were really good about creating, I wouldn't say good. We were pretty decent around creating legal operational agreements in advance, knowing what we were agreeing to, both like what kind of leverage we were going to, et cetera. So, but what we were not good at was agreeing to how we're going to treat each other. We were not great at it. What it means to be a partner, what it means to create psychological safety, starting to define trust around behaviors. What are the behaviors that create the trust? What are the behaviors we need to lean in? And then when somebody gets off track, hey, let's look at our commitments, our 10 commandments. I'm noticing that we're not upholding one of these. What would it look like for us to uphold this one, right? So that's where I think in advance, if you are creating a startup, especially before you start dishing out equity, let's get it for not only legal agreements together, but let's get the social contract together, right? Which is, what are the expectations for behavior on this company? And this is going to be joint. This isn't me dictating it. This is together we're going to create this. This is the a modus operandi for how we treat each other, how we respect each other, so that whatever happens, we have a psychologically safe environment.
I love that.
By the way, core values can have the same exact impact.
Right.
Basically, what core values are.
Right. It's similar in that sense.
It's the soul of an organization.
Yeah. No, that's great stuff. I'd like to kind of tie this whole conversation. This has been a fascinating conversation. I'd like to usually wrap up with, again, the show is Lessons via Leaders. What are some lessons that really stick out to you, things you've learned over the years, or like it could be one or two, it could be multiple, but like something that like, recently or sometimes something over the years that has been profound that you've recently discovered that has served you well in life or in business?
It's amazing. Part of you asked me in the beginning, and I never really got into like why I got into this business or how I got into the impact thing. But one of the things that I thought about was, so obviously you're a person who likes to read books. You're really fascinated by leaders. You're constantly learning, right? And I am too. I remember back in the day when I was starting to get in this space, I was really looking up to Tim Ferriss and listening to everything he was doing and that whole ecosystem that he created. And I mean, think of this Ryan Holiday book you have here. I mean, I don't think Ryan Holiday would be anything without Tim Ferriss. So you see all these people, Jocko Willink would not be. So I was really a big fan of that whole space. Mm-hmm. And so I was thinking like, whoa, not only can I get paid to do this, to try to add value to people, these CEOs and everything we were talking about, they're my mentors. They're people that I look up to. I'm their coach. Think about that. I'm their coach, but they're people who are my mentors, which is unbelievable. So amazing. I can provide value, get paid, and at the same time learn a ton, right? So I just want to put that together, that I'm constantly learning. Yeah. I'm constantly learning. So what's one of the lessons? So I think that I want to bring it back to probably one of my biggest fumbles. Okay. Right? Because I think that's where we learn the best. And I want to go back to my business partnership. Something I've been thinking about in my head, especially being back here in Miami. Mm-hmm. I look all around, and especially as real estate, remember that deal, or I remember when we passed up that deal, and I remember when that building wasn't built, or like, wow, I can't believe that. Right? So we're constantly, and I remember studying Miami real estate with him constantly, and I miss that relationship. I miss that dynamic that we had together. He pushed me to be absolutely a better businessman. He pushed me to think in a bunch of different ways, right? And so the fact that fumbled and we both didn't do a good job of protecting that relationship, that's the lesson. Exactly what we talked about around, we didn't create the guidelines in advance to figure out how to protect the sanctity of this relationship, rather than getting all the craziness of business and money got in between the partnership, right? And that can happen in spousal dynamics, that can happen in partnerships, that happen on leadership teams. So I think that's the big lesson, is trying to figure out a way that I don't care what happens, how do we maintain a level of trust and composure that the sanctity of the relationship is upheld? And we just kind of talked about how, but I think that is something that I did not do well. And as I look back, I would do differently.
I love that. Just kind of getting out in front of these things, right? Having those, those important boundaries set and making sure that, you have the parameters to actually have a healthy dynamic and a healthy relationship, right?
Yeah. Because the fallout's too painful.
Oh, for sure.
To lose, not only, from a monetary perspective, it was painful. Right. But from a personal relationship, from a stress dynamic, it's too painful. And then when you're in these stressful dynamics, when you're going through these breakups or divorces or whatever, it affects everything else in your life.
Definitely. Right. Since we've been on this topic, and I want to wrap up the conversation with something powerful, vulnerability and how important it is. And again, just how powerful vulnerability can be. We talked about all these things and all these different things that we've learned through the years. And, sometimes it can come off as advice. Sometimes it can come off like we're preaching. But really, a lot of the lessons we learn is through the struggles, right, that we're going through in life. Yeah. Like you just mentioned one.
The fumbles.
So if we may go there, I'd love to ask you, what are some of the things that are currently going on in your life that you're struggling with? And then I can take a turn as well and just go into a little bit of therapy mode.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's actually related to what I was just talking about. And so that is one thing I'm struggling with. Yeah. This partnership was really, I've learned so much since then, but this basically broke up in 14, 15. Mm-hmm. And I can't believe it's almost 5-6 years.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Jeez, 2020, right? And so being here in Miami, I'm noticing a lot of feelings of regret, shoulda, coulda, woulda. Mm-hmm. How much more money I would have made in real estate if we were healthy. And we would have.
Brian and I were just talking about that, right? If we would have been able to, double down somewhere a few years back.
And we did. Yeah. Honestly, we did well with what we did, but we could have done so much more. The crazy Wynwood. Mm-hmm. We were in there. We were in there, right? But because of the dysfunctionality of our relationship, I don't think that's a word, but because of the dysfunctional nature of our relationship, we missed out, right? And it's not, again, not just about the money. It was about the creativity, about what we could have done. That's what I think about some of the buildings we had under contract, that like thinking about what they could be now and the creative spaces we could have created and potentially the innovation and the fun and creating community. So it wasn't just about the money, it was about the impact, right? And it's unfortunate. And one of the things I say is that I like to work on in organizations, the opposite of good culture is drama. Right. And so there is such thing as called the drama tax. So in a way, I'm kind of like a drama accountant trying to reduce the amount of tax liability, the drama tax liability. Right. Cool. So that's something that I'm struggling with, this feeling of looking back about what I should have done differently. And I'm trying to take as much responsibility, but struggling with that line, as I talked about before, with beating myself up around what I could have done versus, you know what, there will be more opportunities in the future. And the reason why there's beat up right now versus purely, oh, you know what, that's okay, that was a lesson to learn, well, let's do it again in the future, is that this same feeling around markets. I'm not in control of that, and will do. You know, when you start, we're pretty young. We've only been through a couple market cycles, right? I've only really been through one market cycle. We came out of college in really 2008. We saw the decline and just been in crazy market since then, right? And so the last 4 or 5 years, from an investment standpoint, like there's big things that I missed because of this, right? And so the question is like, okay, when will I get a chance again, right? Because right now things seem so crazy priced, and it seems like, you know, do you really want to be buying at the top of a cycle? So I have all of those thoughts that are kind of coming up again. And when you talk about investing, when you talk about markets, there's such a psychological and emotion component to it. So anyway, so that's something that I'm working through right now, to be fully honest.
Awesome, man. Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it. So for me, I think, again, my biggest struggle is time management. You know, I've got a lot of stuff on my plate. I'm doing a lot of different things, focus and making sure that I'm working on the right thing at the right time and protecting my calendar and protecting, you know, where I spend my mental energy. That's something I feel like I'm struggling with, because I kind of just let kind of everything come at me at once, and I'm just kind of fending things off as it comes. Something I've always struggled with. I tend to have ebbs and flows where it gets better and then worse, better, worse. I feel like lately I've really become more self-aware about these issues, and I'm starting to put parameters in place to really get better at that. So something I'm struggling with, but I think it's important to be self-aware so we can put those structures in place, or else, you know, you can't fix it if you don't identify the problem first, right? Yeah. So
I can't imagine there's anybody else listening to this that has time management challenges.
We all do, right?
Right, nowadays.
So if you're listening, I'm fighting the battle. They're with you. You know?
Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, Adam, thank you so much. This was like an incredible podcast. Thank you so much for spending the time and sharing this stuff. I mean, I could talk about this stuff with you for hours and hours. So thank you, man. I really appreciate it. And if people want to find you, get in touch with you, how could they do that?
So our website is called OnCourse International. You'll notice that I'm a partner in OnCourse International. It's kind of a loosely held together consulting forum, right? So we're all individual practitioners, but we have this website where a lot of our content is, and and so some of our colleagues are on there as well. So OnCourse International, LinkedIn, you can find me, Adam Silberstein, Yeah, that's where you'll find me. You can find me on Lessons Via Leaders.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you again, man.
I want to say something real quick is that I've known you for a short period of time, and I'm just very impressed with your level of vulnerability, your level of just, kind of interest in growing, and your thirst for knowledge is just absolutely incredible. But I think the most important thing that I see in you is your ability to create community, whether it's Waffle Wednesdays in the leadership dinners, just your ability to create community is unbelievable, and I really commend that you're continuing to do this with the podcast. Thank you for introducing me to your community and making me a part of it.
Oh man, thank you so much for saying that. That really means a lot to me. And again, very proud of what we're building with the LLC, the Local Leaders Collective. And I'll say it again, couldn't have done it without you, man. Like, you were such an integral part in creating the space and the culture and the vibe for what it became. There wasn't one person that left that initial launch and training that didn't say Adam was fucking amazing, or Adam is incredible at his job, or Adam really did such a fantastic job. I mean, everybody was singing your praises. So if you're listening to this again, please look up Adam, check him out on LinkedIn, connect with him, because he's definitely a person you want in your life. Every time we sit down, I learn a lot from you. So thanks always, man, for spending the time.
Thanks. Appreciate it. This is awesome.